Hi, my name's Don Smith. I'm here with Mike Farrell, and we're answering questions from small and medium-sized businesses about the COVID-19 pandemic from a business perspective. So, hi, Mike.
Good afternoon, Don. How you doing?
Good, thanks. So we'll get right into it. The first question that we have from businesses is for businesses that want to remain open or to reopen once the restrictions are relaxed, what things do they need to think about to ensure employee health and safety while working effectively and efficiently?
Sure. Well, the primary concern, of course, is for managers and supervisors is their employees' health and safety. With the COVID-19, those interactions that you have in the workplace go into people's homes. So if you're, and vice versa, what happens in people's homes with their family members are being brought into the workplace. Right. Which really makes the employees' families sort of part of your extended workplace family. So because of that, it's really important to remain vigilant and ensure people's safety from the parking lot when they arrive in the morning, throughout the day, and then back to the parking lot at the end of the day. We have to think about employees' physical safety, but also their mental health. There's a lot of stress out there today with folks related to COVID. So we want people to be in the workplace. We want to make sure that we can keep them physically safe, but also that they're reassured that when we can make them as safe as possible. So when they return home to the family, they're not bringing back this virus.
Right, right. So could you provide some examples of the kinds of things that employers need to think about and how they might reduce the risks?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, if you're able to work from home, work from home. The reality is, in many cases, that's not possible, especially if you're doing manufacturing or production processes. So if that's the case, we want to think about things like personal protective equipment. Right. We want to think about maintaining social distance throughout the workday. We want to think about managing people through common spaces. We want to think about the use of common tools and how that is an issue, and something as simple as how many people are touching paperwork throughout the day.
Right, right. Okay, and that's a good point. You know, the other day I was in the bank there, and when I had to sign something, first instinct was to reach for the public pen.
Yeah.
And it caught myself and ended up using my own pen, which I now always carry with me to avoid those situations. So, so then let's talk about the PPE a little bit more.
Sure.
So what tips would you have with regards to personal protective equipment?
Well, for personal protective equipment, so what would be sort of additional to what you might normally see in a workplace is, in many instances, folks are wearing nitrate gloves throughout the day and changing those sort of every time they wash their hands, which they should be doing several times throughout the day. Also, a lot of folks are wearing masks, non-surgical masks. There's a little bit of a risk I want to highlight to people if you're going to do that, is that if people are not used to wearing a non-surgical mask, there's a tendency to want to adjust it quite often throughout the day, which is kind of counterproductive. So what we're trying to do is keep people from touching surfaces, then touching their face. So just be aware of that. In fact, in some instances, we've got folks that are out there actually wearing visors similar to what you have seen where people are doing tests, those roadside tests for the temporary COVID sites, testing sites. So a full face shield. Yeah. That really prevents you from touching your eyes, nose, and mouth throughout the day, even if you're wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. But right. So that's an opportunity.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. So with regards to common spaces, what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, the first thing is you need to look at the size of the common space and then think about how many people can be in that space and maintain social distancing, or, you know, as best you can. In office areas and lunchrooms, identifying the capacity for that room, putting a sign on the door so people, you know, can check that capacity before they enter the room. Only one person at a lunch table, each lunch table in the lunchroom, things of that nature. In the common areas. People that work in admin areas, if they don't need to go to production spaces, that should be prohibited, and vice versa. If production folks don't need to be in admin space, we should limit that as much as possible.
Okay. And we talked a little bit there about social distancing as well. Do you have any other thoughts on that, like in the production environment and with barriers and?
Yeah, so in the production area, you need to take a real critical look at all the motions that happen in the workplace. You can things like having one-way traffic, where typically it might be two-way traffic. And when I say one-way, I mean either one way all the time, if you can do that. If you can't, one way at a time. So if you're in a corridor and somebody's in the corridor, you exit and let them pass before you enter the corridor. Yeah, posting signs in the workplace as friendly reminders for people. Looking at the workstations themselves, possibly relocating workstations if you need to. You mentioned putting barriers up between workstations if you can't maintain a reasonable safe distance. That's the kind of things we see in grocery stores. At the checkout, they have a barrier so that people aren't breathing on each other. Basically, that's really what that's all about.
Right. Okay. And use of common tools.
Sure. This is a high risk area. If you're using a tool that somebody else uses, so something as simple as you mentioned a pen earlier. So writing instruments, keep your own at hand. Keyboards that are often commonly used at common work areas in the workplace. So you need to think about that, how you're going to prevent that as much as possible. And there's no simple answer for that kind of thing, but making sure that people, if they're wearing, definitely wear gloves if you're going to be using common tools at all times, and change the gloves frequently and wash your hands frequently.
Yeah, excellent. And then any thoughts on touching paper there? We talked about the pens and stuff like that. But,
yeah, well, eliminating paperwork is always a good thing from a process point of view, but in the short term, you're not going to be able to do a whole lot of that. So minimize the amount of transfer of paperwork if you can. Again, wear gloves at all times if you're touching paperwork. Use your own pen, not somebody else's pen. But there, in the law, if this need extends at a great length of time in terms of being able having to have these extra precautions, I would suggest you look at your process and try to make it paperless as best you can.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Okay, so is there anything else that as parting thoughts here that people might want to consider?
Sure. One other thing that definitely want to think about is how communicating with your staff through this change. So if they're ramping, if you're in the process of ramping up to get back into production, have you communicate with your staff to ensure that they're going to feel comfortable when they return. So use your email, use your frequently asked questions type approach. So ask and answer a question. Call them if you have to, but make sure you make contact with everybody to ensure that they feel safe. Because as I mentioned earlier, it's not just your employees, it's your employees' families also have, they deserve that sense of comfort as well. And when your people do return to work, you want them focusing on the work and working efficiently, not focusing on other things that would distract them from doing their work.
Right. Okay, well, that was great, Mike. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Yeah.
All right. Take care.